Mm. Hey y'all, welcome to the Devon A. Morris Unfiltered Call-In Show. Have a seat. Let's get ready. You have any questions? Come on, call in. Come on to that Discord channel. Do me a favor, get the unfiltered crew some finger snaps. We're ready to get started here. Mondays, 8 p.m. Every single Monday, we're here. I'm excited about it. Are you? Let's get this show started, y'all. The greatest Scrum show on earth. I'll see y'all soon. Enjoy. Hey, how y'all doing? It's been a little bit of time here. It's been a little while here. Probably a couple weeks, man. Went to the Scrum gathering, then last week was a holiday, so I wasn't around. If you don't know me, my name is Devon Morris. I'm gonna be your guide on this journey, right? I'm gonna be your guide on this journey. We got a good topic to talk about today. That topic is gonna be overcoming scope challenges in Scrum. Just one of those big deals that happen. If you've been around long enough around this thing, that kind of stuff happens, right? So no big deal. A lot of you all that are here right now, whether you're out there on LinkedIn, Facebook, or you're joining me right here in the YouTubes of the world, then guess what? You know how this goes already, right? We talk about the topic of the day maybe for about 15 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever it takes. About 8:30, we're normally done, and then we jump into any questions that you may have. And this show, you can, just jump in and ask some questions. You come live on the show or drop them in the comments, and we can take it from there. I didn't receive anything via email, so I don't have any of those to send across. At least nothing that I couldn't answer real quick that would be appropriate for the show. Now, that being said, what's going on with me? Nothing, just busy. Started another term in terms of school, so first week, this is the second weekend. Had to go to a wedding yesterday, wedding Saturday, graduation Sunday. Just life, man, life. Got a daughter starting an internship someplace. Got one that's getting into, 6 to 8 months of being on her job at an accounting firm. So, got kids asking me, hey, man, how do I deal with these politics? So it's been a busy time for me. But in terms of Scrum and what I do on a regular basis, guess what, y'all? Still doing that stuff, working for clients, just solving problems. I'm having some interesting things that are coming up, right? Interesting because it just excites me. I get excited by some of the weirdest things that happen within Scrum, especially when it's been a while since I experienced them, right? So I like little challenges, right? I like little challenges along the way. So this will be an interesting topic that we will talk about. Let me see what else is going on. I went to the Scrum gathering. I actually came on live because I came back late because I was in so many conversations, right? I haven't been to a Scrum gathering in a long time. This is really the first time I've attended a conference, and I'll talk about that after we talk about the topic a little bit, give you some of my opinions, my thoughts in terms of attending, and then some of the things that I plan to do that some of you all could be interested in somewhat, but we will see if you're interested in it or not. So we're just going to keep pushing forward, keep making things happen, and then we will kind of go from there. I'm at the point where I probably got about 2 years to go in terms of this PhD. So I probably will be attending more stuff and putting everything back out there. Now, since my aunt passed away, I don't have to worry about getting her sick. By getting her daughter sick, I don't have to worry about that at least anymore. So I'm actually feeling like I got a little bit more freedom. And so that's a bad thing but good thing, especially when you've done your part, right? Let's see what else. Yeah, that's really fundamentally where things are at, right? So people will come in along the way. Just make sure when you come in you say hi. This is kind of what we do on a regular basis all the time. It just is what it is. We record it so you can see it later, and then we just take it piece by piece and kind of go from there. Let's see what else is going on. Other than that, I got a CSPO this morning. Next week I got a CSM that I'm doing. So just rocking these things as I normally rock them. So then we get through stuff, right? Get through stuff, make things happen like they're supposed to happen. Um, let's see, CSP not till the end of the year. Um, July probably gonna hit a vacation. Got a few classes in July, so it's just interesting times. It's good. It's good. Just kind of like the steady flow, right? Nothing real crazy, nothing real extreme, nothing real special. Just feeling good about everything that's happening. So hopefully you are too. So we will talk more later, but what I want to jump into is I kind of want to jump into the topic, this overcoming scope situation, right? Now, here's the deal. Let's kind of move forward. Scope is an interesting thing, right? When you are a scrum master and you wasn't ever a project manager, you probably don't think about scope in the same way, right? A lot of project managers think in terms of constraints that exist, and classically it's the triple constraint. The biggest of those constraints happen to be scope. You know, almost any class that I poll, almost anybody who is involved in this type of work will say that 95 to 100% of the efforts that they worked on did not complete 100% of the scope. This is just facts, okay? Um, and I mean, if you don't believe that, just poll some people around you that have worked on efforts before and ask them, did you complete 100% of the scope? Within reason, on time, type deal, right? On time, on budget. And most of them will be like, we ended up negotiating on scope. Yeah, we were successful in getting the effort done, the project done, but we ultimately had to negotiate on scope. So scope is always this thing that happens, and it's just something that you need to just be really familiar with. Now, for those that have never been around this statement of scope, when I say scope, I'm really referring to requirements, right? The requirements that are expected to be done. Collectively, we call all of that the scope of the effort. Now, that being said, let's start having a little conversation, right? So, today we're talking about overcoming scope challenges in Scrum in particular, right? A lot of people have dealt with scope, but how do you deal with that situation when it comes to Scrum? Well, the first thing is, if you don't know me, my name is Devon Morris. I've been around Scrum since 2005. I got a lot of certifications. I'm currently in school to get a PhD. Worked at a lot of different organizations over time between me and the company. Primarily, my organization is Bearded Eagle, who supports me in everything that I do. And then this is the Unfiltered show, right? Now, the first thing I need to talk to you about is a perspective of the simple truth, and this is purely from a Scrum perspective, right? Don't get this twisted, but if you're doing Scrum the way that you're supposed to do Scrum, scope creep is not an issue. It's just really that simple. Now, you take a couple perspectives. The first perspective is the simple one: if you're living and breathing agile. Because if you're living and breathing agile, there's a really important, extremely important principle that exists, and it is welcome changing requirements, even late in development. Agile processes harness change for the customer's competitive advantage, right? And the first one, even goes a little bit deeper than that because this is the second principle. The first one, you know, really says the customer is our highest priority. So if our customer is our highest priority and we welcome change even late in the game, that means that we have no problem with theoretical scope creep, right? We find some ways to handle and deal with that in some kind of way. Now, that does mean that if you're doing Scrum, you should be living and breathing the values and principles of the Agile Manifesto. We do Scrum, we live and breathe the values and principles of the Agile Manifesto. So those things tie together, right? And so it's just not the 4 values, you got to also think about the 12 principles, right? And like I said, you look at the first one, again, customer highest priority. You look at the second one, welcome and change requirements even late in the game. This is already telling you that scope is fluid. It's telling you from the jump, we expect scope to be fluid, right? And for most of you all that have worked within the space, you know that you classically have customers that really don't know what they want until you start putting things in their hands, right? And when you start putting things in their hands, then they got a better idea. Once they touch it, they rub it, they feel it, right? They start saying, I like this, I don't like it, the texture's not right, da 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 da. You didn't put any lotion on your skin, whatever it is, right? So the idea is really just that simple. Fluidity and scope is something that is very normal amongst any of the agile methods. So all of them have some fluidity in terms of scope. That is, if they're living and breathing both the values and principles of the Agile Manifesto. Principle number one, highest priority, customer. Principle number two, welcome changing requirements even late in the game. Okay, so that tells you something up front. Now, when you think about Scrum in particular, I'm going to point you toward the Scrum guide. And in Scrum, it literally says the product backlog is an emergent ordered list. Emergent is about arising unexpectedly. So, all that's really saying to you in the basic definition, even in Scrum, that product backlog is going to be somewhat fluid in terms of that product backlog. So in terms of scope, you don't get away from the fluidity. Now, in terms of Scrum, I will say this as well. We don't do the same thing with the sprint backlog. The product backlog, fluidity all over the place, right? The sprint backlog, you're not supposed to change the nature of what you're committing to, right? So that's an important distinction. We deal with that welcome and change anytime in that product backlog. The sprint backlog, we kind of lock that to some degree to give the developers an opportunity to get done what they committed to. When I say developer, I'm not talking about software developer. I'm talking about anyone that's working on any aspect of building whatever it is we're trying to build. So it's really, really simple and plain in terms of Scrum as well. So again, what do you want to do with Scrum though? You want to live and breathe the values and principles of the Agile Manifesto. So they go hand in hand. So when you think about that emergent ordered list that we call a product backlog, it's going to likely change in some kind of way. Because as stated, scope is fluid in this world. Fluid, right? Now, that means that if scope is fluid, we have to manage other things within the triple constraint. And it's important for you to understand that, and we will talk about the triple constraint in the future, okay? But the idea for right now is we're only talking about scope and dealing with those challenges. Now, if we take this further than that, what are some of those scope challenges that I classically see? There's probably three of them that are main ones that really exist in over my years of being involved with Scrum. Being involved with projects in general, it's just been the same few things. It doesn't matter to me whether it's a waterfall effort, or a Scrum effort, or any other kind of effort. These are classic scope challenges that I see. Now, the first one is going to be just called generally scope creep. This is the one that pretty much everybody talks about. This is the addition of scope or requirements, user stories, whatever the type of requirements that you're utilizing without appropriate adjustment to time and resources. Now, I'm going to do a big favor for me and you. When I say resources here, I'm going to kind of scratch that because in general, we're talking about cost, right? In general, we're talking about cost. Resources is a function of cost, and a lot of people like to only say resources, but cost is not just resources. Some people don't like to call humans resources. So, however you decide to do it, the human capital, the other resources, the total cost, whatever it is, these three things, but classically, the word that's used in a triple constraint is cost. But you can boil it down to any of these things if you want to. Time and costs, if they're not going to change, right? And you keep changing scope, you keep adding scope in particular, that's classically looked at as scope creep. You can put yourself in a bad situation where you end up in a death march where all three of these things are locked. And if all three of these things are locked, then we have a really, really big problem at that particular point in time. So just really, really interesting, really amazing. But scope creep is simply that. So we're all clear on that definition. Another thing that classically impacts us will be the second thing, vague user stories. When I say a user story, y'all, most of you all already know this. I am really referring to requirements, right? Because a user story is a type of a requirement. A user story is a requirement from the perspective of the actual user. So when the user stories are vague, I'm really saying the requirements are vague, which means you have ambiguities in user stories or requirements that can lead to incorrect implementation, which really causes us to have a big old issue with rework. Whole issue with rework. And we don't necessarily want to do rework for the sake of just rework, right? I mean, I get that sometimes things will change, but rework, I can't say it's totally frowned upon. It does happen, but the idea is that we don't want to have tons and tons and tons of rework. So vague stories tend to lead to that. So you want to be careful with that because, again, those are some of the scope challenges. And here's the final thing that I want to hit you with: changing objectives. There's a lot of times that scope changes because the objectives of the effort have changed. The goal in mind evolves as the market or organizational priorities shift. Now, this right here, this happens a lot, okay? A lot more than we tend to recognize that there's some kind of shift. And if there is some kind of shift, it's likely going to impact what you're doing in some kind of way. So changing objectives definitely lead to that kind of challenges with scope. And that's okay. It's something that we see. It's not a bad thing. I'd rather see a change happen sooner versus later. But a change is a change. And it will have some type of impact on you. So these are those classic three things that I see. Okay, now there's some other ones that I see that I don't want to necessarily bring up per se, but just look after these as well. And those three things would be poorly defined sprint goals, goal plating. Sometimes people look at that very negatively. Goal plating is adding additional functionality to something that the requirement doesn't call for. Misalignment with product goals. That means you're not working in the direction that you should be working in. So these are other things that you look out for. I could add probably 3 or 4 more things to this list. I just don't want to go into anything deep because I think the first 3 are the things that you're going to find 95% of the time. Okay. So the question is, how do you overcome these things, right? How do you overcome these things? Because overcoming them becomes a big part of what we do just all the time, just overcoming them piece by piece. The first thing that I'm going to recommend that you do is actually define clear requirements. That's the first statement. Make sure your requirements are extremely clear. Now, when I say clear requirements, I'm talking about clear, well-defined user stories and acceptance criteria to ensure alignment with all team members and stakeholders. That alignment is extremely important. You want everybody to be on the same page, everybody to be moving in the same direction. When you have everybody on the same page, everybody moving in the same direction, that's less confusion, that's less problems moving forward. And you want to be in a position where you don't have a lot of problems. That's really as simple as it gets. So make sure that you have really clear requirements. Now, when you do have clear requirements, the way you get there to have those clear requirements, one of them is backlog refinement. Refinement is not a meeting in Scrum, but it is an activity. You go into refining almost immediately. You want to make sure you do regular backlog refining to help clarify and break down requirements. That's really, really important. And then what you want to do as well is you want to make sure acceptance criteria is extremely clear. Clearly defined acceptance criteria for every single user story ensures that you got some criteria that you need to meet. And this is going to reduce some of the scope challenges. I was just talking to some people after the daily Scrum today, and they have a user story where they're consistently changing things with the product owner, Sprint ends tomorrow. And here's the deal. The thing that they're changing doesn't change the functionality. So do I really consider that to be scope creep or changing the story? Not really. It doesn't have impact the sprint goal. So do I see it as a problem? Not really. This is what I see as the problem. Changes so late in the sprint. That's where it's a problem for me. Changes so late in the sprint. And I'm a little less worried about it this time because this was a story that was picked up a little late in the sprint anyway. So I can't really complain too much. It's not going to impact the sprint goal. So if things are changing and being impacted, we got to make those kind of decisions accordingly. But the thing that's changing is that acceptance criteria, not the user story itself per se, right? But it is clear. It's just adjustments need to be made for whatever reason. So now you think about those clear requirements, then that takes us into the second thing that's really important. And that second thing is going to be enhancing communication. Look, here's the deal. Effective communication between the Scrum team and stakeholders is absolutely critical, right? Because what it does is it aligns expectations and addresses scope changes immediately, promptly, as soon as you possibly can. In having everybody on the same page, it just makes your entire journey easy, right? One thing about Scrum that's really important is Scrum has a radical level of transparency. That radical level of transparency is something that's really the beauty related to Scrum, right? It really makes Scrum such an amazing thing, right? Now, what are some ways that you can deal with that, especially when it comes to aligning a team and aligning stakeholders? I think there's really two places you do that alignment. That first place is going to be in the daily stand-ups, the daily scrums, right? Because you utilize the daily scrums, the daily stand-ups to ensure that the developers remain synchronized. Now, for those that don't know, the daily scrum doesn't require the scrum master to be there anymore, nor the product owner, because the focus of the daily scrum is for the developers to synchronize their work. So developers can format this meeting any way they choose to. It's just the idea is for them to remain on the same page, for them to understand how they're collectively reaching that goal and what do they need to do to adjust making it to that goal. That synchronization is part of that effective communication that happens within team as they're doing that work. So that daily scrum is the absolute great place to do it. And again, it's not the only place to do it, right? They can do it outside that event. I would love it to do it outside an event because the daily scrum would go down to being a minimum. Now, that being said, the other place is stakeholder meetings. And I'm going to point to one stakeholder meeting in particular, and that is the sprint review. I got to point to that, right? Because the sprint review is the regular place where you actually pull stakeholders in and involve them in a session so you can get their alignment and buy-in as you're building stuff, as you're completing stuff along the way. So that right there is extremely important. Do I think you should probably meet with some of the stakeholders outside of this, the sprint review? Absolutely, yes. No question in my mind, no question in my heart that that's something that you should do, right? You do that is going to help you tremendously. But for me, I think about those linchpins as being the daily scrum and the actual sprint review. Love the retrospective, but these are the two that I would jump toward in terms of thinking about making sure that we have alignment amongst the developers and that we're addressing the needs of the stakeholders, okay? Doesn't stop there, because our next thing is to educate and align stakeholders. Probably one of the biggest problems that I run into in this whole Scrum thing is we don't typically educate the stakeholders. Like, yeah, product owner, yeah, okay, maybe, right? Developers, absolutely. Scrum masters get all the knowledge, right? But stakeholders, we kind of leave out the game, right? And it's one of those things that almost any time I've educated the stakeholders about anything, they were like sponges. Like, they really, really appreciated it, right? They really, really thanked me, right? I remember the first time that I really proposed the stakeholders writing the actual user stories, like all the stakeholders, just using user stories as the format upon which they communicate the requirements. Didn't matter where they were coming from. Using user stories to communicate the requirements, right? And when I was teaching the stakeholders about user stories, they fell in love with it because they said, this is easier. We can think from the perspective of the user real easy because we probably are more connected with the user. And so it just made it like a breeze at that point. So I just always think you need to educate stakeholders. Probably the biggest reason why you do is because their expectations might be aligned with traditional approaches. That's probably the biggest reason that I have. And that usually leads to some misunderstandings, right? It's like in the traditional way of doing things, I'm used to people showing up in the beginning and at the very end. And that doesn't bring you in alignment, right? What brings you in alignment is those touch points along the way. Those touch points along the way helps tremendously. One way that you can do that is do training sessions, right? Agile training sessions. Offer some training sessions to the stakeholders to help them understand various agile processes, and then how to maintain scope, how they can contribute to that in some kind of way, right? And then the other thing is, what are the benefits of agile, right? I think one of the okay, first let me state this, right? Communicating how the flexibility, the iterative nature of, Scrum helps them, emphasizing collaborative goal achievement over rigid initial plans. Okay, let's say that, okay? However, I think one of the clearest ways to educate and communicate with them and to build trust with them is ultimately delivering. When you deliver, even if it's not to production, when you deliver, it builds confidence. When you deliver, it actually sparks interest. So if I'm you, I would spend lots of time trying to deliver, right? You do that, you'll build you'll build some alliance really, really quick. Okay? And you really want to do that, right? So just make sure you educate them, make sure you align the stakeholders because they're there to help you get to the goal. It's everybody else's building. Everybody else in the building must help us as the Scrum team get to the destination. Okay? That's always what it should be. Next, regularly review goals and progress. Like, make sure you continuously inspect your product goal, your sprint goals along the way, how they're working out. Think about current progress that the team is making, how to adjust things accordingly, internally, externally, to make things better. The connection points there is review of the product, review of the process. Review of the product to get feedback on the product is all about the sprint review. A lot of you all may call that a sprint demo. The sprint review is where you utilize the sprint review to assess what you accomplished and what needs to be adjusted moving forward. That's all product feedback. That's all product feedback. It is nothing more than just product feedback. That helps you. And then that retrospective is where you're talking about the goods, the bads, and how we're going to make things better. And you specifically can talk about how you're handling scope. Remember, the retrospective should have a product owner involved and engaged in it as well, so you can have deeper conversations about that. But that retrospective is really all about the process. So you're taking care of the product and the process, and you can talk about your goals and you can talk about requirements in both of them, right? From those different perspectives. So they're really, really important. Now, this right here, you see I have the word rigorous in parentheses, not in parentheses, in quotes. Implement rigorous change control. Okay. If you're doing a Scrum like you're supposed to, you don't need any rigorous change control at all. Because the change control happens naturally within the product backlog, the communication between the stakeholders, the product owner, and the developers. You naturally get that built within the system of Scrum. So nothing has to be rigorous about it. It can be really, really loose. It can be fairly informal. You don't have to put boundaries around it. But I had to write this one because when I looked at the word rigorous, right? When I look at this word right here, this only to me applies when you have a lot of traditional things that are going on, a lot of rigid things that are happening within the organization. That becomes more and more important as you're trying to get to that destination to figure it out, right? And so you may need to create a formal change control process, right? Where you establish some formal process for evaluating the impact of proposed changes. That could include assessing time, cost, as well as scope. Okay. But the biggest person I think that should be involved in this is the product owner. The product owner is actively involved in approving whatever those changes are, and to scope in particular. Now, I say approval because I'm thinking a very formal, rigid organization. Do I really want an approval process? I don't. I just want the product owner to be able to make a decision, right? Um, but based on the organization that you're involved in, I have to think about organizations that still have a lot of that traditional mentality built inside of them. And when you have that traditional mentality built inside of you, you may have to have some form of change control process. Now, I'm not saying that's where you should jump to it. I'm not saying that's what you start with. I'm not saying that's what Scrum says to do. I'm just saying based on the reality of what I've seen over time, sometimes that change control is almost nothing else I can do but establish something. It normally takes like pulling a couple of teeth from me to get me to that place. That's the reason why I put rigorous in quotes, right? Because Scrum has it naturally built in already, right? But sometimes that's just not enough. And your politics may help be a big determiner of that, okay? So be careful. Now, you know, I'm here at my time. So one more thing I want to tell you is this. Scope is not the only thing that can be adjusted. Remember I mentioned the triple constraint? I'm serious. Scope is just not the only thing. There are many other things that can be adjusted accordingly, and scope is just one of them. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna next week talking about scrumming through the triple constraint. We're gonna talk about the triple constraint. We're gonna talk about how we deal with that in our world of Scrum slash Agile, and then we'll go from there. So that will close out our presentation for the day in terms of overcoming scope challenges when using Scrum. I think it was a great topic. And I think this will help a lot of people out in the future. But our next topic is going to be how to actively deal with that triple constraint. Okay, so really, really important. I think it'll be a good one. On that note, we're done with that, right? So here's what I'll ask you to do. First of all, let's start off in a simple place. Say hi to me in the chat. Just drop a hi, give a shout out in the chat. Say what's up so I know you're here, right? And now I will open the floor for questions that you may have. Now, if you haven't been around this whatsoever, the way we do this is you can drop your questions in the comments, right? Or you're welcome to join the show. If you want to join the show, then I'm gonna have to grab my headphones and everything else and make sure all that's working before we get there. And you know, they're sitting right there, so we can be good to go. But if you want to join the show, it's a simple link. I'll drop the link in the chat on YouTube. I'll drop it also in on LinkedIn. Let's see if they allow me to. So we can be good to
Let's
go.
see. So,
But if you
I
want to
think
join
talking
the
to
show,
me, I don't want that.
let me drop it there too. Again, I got this live on Facebook. I do not talk on Facebook. It's for my mama to see me there when she logs on. But I see one person said hi, and that is Patrick. How you doing, brother? How's it been? Hopefully everything is good with you, Patrick. Everything is amazing with me. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna just bring up a topic, right? Let me talk to you all about something I think is really important. I kind of, well, 2 weeks ago, I went to the Scrum gathering. Okay. Now, for those that haven't been around Scrum forever, the Scrum gathering is simply a conference. That's all it is. The Scrum Alliance every year puts on multiple events. There's always a US based event, there's always an international based event, and then there is all of the actual regional events, one day events, other events that kind of exist. And those things happen around the world, okay? But every year in a city, there's always going to be a Scrum gathering in the US, and then there'll be one in different locations internationally. This year, the one in the US was in New Orleans. Last time I was in New Orleans was like 2014. I haven't been to a Scrum gathering since 2018 or 2019. And then obviously I haven't been since the pandemic, right? Because I didn't want anybody to get sick. So it was really my big job to stay away from big events that had a lot of people in them, because I didn't want to get my aunt who died early this year of cancer, I did not want to bring home to her COVID, right? Um, and so I stayed away from events like that. Okay. Now, no problem attending virtually, but not in person. That wasn't a risk I was willing to take. Now, since she's passed on, I went ahead and went. And truth is, I had an amazing time. I had an amazing time. Um, a lot of people attended. It was like I always remember it to be. As a certified Scrum trainer, as a guide in particular, we were able to, we're invited to go to a retreat on a Sunday prior. The person who I mentored this past year in terms of becoming a CST, she actually earned her CST. So I'm very, very proud to see her earn her CST. Um, let's see what else happened in the actual event. The retreat, there were some good things talked about in terms of where Scrum is going. At least the Scrum Alliance is going with Scrum, and that stuff is promising. I will say to you, it is promising. You're going to see some things coming in the next month, and few years that are going to be amazing in terms of the direction for the Scrum Alliance and in terms of the Scrum community in general. So nothing but pluses in terms of that. In terms of the gathering, there were a bunch of people that I hadn't seen for years, at the retreat and at the gathering. And then, in terms of being the first black Scrum trainer, a lot of people that haven't met me yet got the opportunity to meet me, which was a plus. I haven't seen them, face to face either. So it was just nice seeing people, right? A lot of times when I'm at the gathering, I'm not going to the actual training events, right? To the speeches, right? I spend a lot of my time at the coaching clinic, where people will come over and they'll have a problem in their organization, and they want some advice. They could have a problem in terms of their career, and they want some advice, right? The thing about becoming a certified Scrum trainer from the beginning times, before there was all this other stuff in Scrum, in terms of all these other actual certifications, is you had to be a Scrum coach. You had to be a person who was in an organization, and you had to be accomplishing things in that organization to actually become a trainer. So you had to, have been successful with Scrum and been a coach for many years. It's not the same thing today, in terms of the different paths that exist. So, I've never espoused to become a CTC or CEC, but from my beginnings, the coach thing was always there. And so it's one of those things where I love seeing people there. Probably my biggest thing that I had to push on was diversity, because I ended up doing a podcast with someone, and I may send a link to you all. It's on LinkedIn. I'll see if I can find it. But that podcast, I had to join it because what's happened, at least, when I've gone around the world, one of the things that I've always professed, especially in places with big populations like in India, I always tell them that, Scrum shouldn't only look like Americans. Shouldn't, right? Scrum is international. It should represent what the world represents internationally. And I always said it's up to them to change that, right? And so I'm going to throw a challenge out to you all in general in terms of us. In terms of African Americans, we're about 13% of the population of the U.S. I'm the only black certified Scrum trainer, period. There are 12 certified enterprise coaches, 12. Well, that may be CTC and CEC. So that's a total of 13, of about 500 guides. That's not a proper representation. That is, single digit percentage, maybe 4 or 5%, maybe. Probably not that, right? So we're not represented very well. And I said African American, right? Imagine if I said blacks on the planet Earth, right? So, in terms of Scrum Alliance, there are 15 black people from around the world that are guides of the 500 that are there. You understand the dilemma, right? Every year that I've been around the Scrum Alliance, I kind of press for more diversity. And this year, I'm going to make a big push to have more diversity, and not just diversity of African Americans, the world of black folks in Scrum, um, of women as well, right? Of different people who live, who identify different than me. I want to see a very good representation of all of us within the Scrum Alliance. And so it's time for me to start fighting, and I'm probably going to fight through the African American thing, the black thing first, to shine a light on other things, right? The world population is 50% women, and it's definitely not 50% gods being women. So there's a lot of fronts to fight on. And I'm not even going to say fight. Fight is the wrong word, right? To encourage change, right? I know from my studies in terms of the PhD, diversity makes organizations stronger. It just does. It helps to bring in diversity of thought, based on everybody's experiences coming together. And yeah, we'll find ways to disagree, but mostly we'll find ways to agree. We have more things common than we don't. So for me, these are areas that at least for this year, I'm going to focus a little heavier on. I need to, because I've just been around as a CST since 2013. And even though I tried in the past, it doesn't mean that I should stop. And now, since the pandemic has pushed its way, my thought process was, let's not worry about any organization. Let's just go ahead and start certifying people. So when the pandemic happened, we just certified a lot of black folks and diverse people, period. And we got some good numbers associated with that. But that's not the only place where it needs to happen in terms of just certifying people, right? If you think about African Americans in the professional world, if we are 12 to 13% of the population, black people probably represent, well, only African Americans represent 7% of the black professional population, right? So white collar jobs in general. When blacks become managers, they represent like 8.3%. Like, we represent 8.3%. When we go become higher level leaders beyond managers, we go down to about 4%. Then, of the Fortune 500 companies, there is 8 African Americans or blacks representing Fortune 500 companies. That's like 1.6%. And 8 was the highest. I think it's lower than that because some people retired. So, one of the things that was coined by, I must say a feminist, but I can't say she was that, by a management consultant, was the concept of a glass ceiling. And most of you all understand that concept of a glass ceiling. And the glass ceiling is just an invisible barrier that prevents people from making it to be upwardly mobile, right? And there's no question that there's a glass ceiling. And the question is, do we really want to break that glass ceiling? I don't know, right? But I'm going to make some efforts at trying to break that for people who want to be involved in the professional world. My philosophy is go start your own company and make your own things happen. But me not working on the other side doesn't make any sense. So this is not about to be a Malcolm Martin thing. This is going to be Malcolm and Martin if they would have lived, how they would have came together. And I want to come together with people like that. So, diversity is definitely a bigger issue. And we need to deal with that diversity thing. I agree with that 10,000%. Just one of those things where we just got to deal with. No better words to say than just that. So if you got any thoughts or questions, anything about that, just kind of join me. Just know that effort is coming. All right, now I believe I'm grabbing the actual link to the diversity podcast I was on. A guy came up to me and we talked for a little bit, and he recorded me. And there's a link here somewhere. I'm actually saying we definitely don't have enough diversity. I didn't mean to start it that way, but let's go ahead and see if I can find this real quick. And then I'll pass it on to you all. There it is right there. Okay. So I'll drop this in the comments. If you want to see it, you're welcome to see it. I will ultimately share it on LinkedIn, probably tomorrow, something like that. And then just kind of go from there. So just so you know. And there's a few people that commented in it. So and then And Sherry Silas said it is what 13 coaches and one me, so that's 14 guides. So my number was a little bit off, but it's all good, you know. Let's see. So that's what it is, right? That's at least that's what it was at that particular time. All right. So, all right. So, people, any questions that you have? Any questions you have? Any questions that you have about anything? I think I've talked a whole lot at this point. It was a good time. Past 2 weeks was good. Hopefully, you had a great holiday on that Monday when we didn't meet. Um, but I really enjoyed myself at the conference. Like I really did. There's a lot of people that I trained I hadn't seen, and I'm so used to seeing people when I train them, and then I've gotten so used to not seeing people when I'm training, right? And so you know, it's just a little different when you see them, right? I love seeing people, and nice seeing people who have taken the Scrum thing and are doing a little bit more with it, like volunteering. Somebody I trained has a job with the Scrum Alliance. Like, it's pretty dope, right? It's pretty dope, right? So see him have a job with the Scrum Alliance as a Scrum Master, I'm just like, this is great. You know what I'm saying? So just seeing people just kind of utilize Scrum in their world to make it something, and then people having aspirations to become CSTs. It's just, it just was really exciting. It was really inspirational for me. And then just seeing the younger folks in Scrum, right? Like they're excited about it, right? That gives me more excitement, right? So I'm just like, oh, this is great. This is amazing. Nothing but goodness, So just is what it is. So nothing but greatness, nothing but things we do. This is how we do it all the time. So, all right, thoughts, questions, comments, anything happening with you all. I'm gonna say, Patrick, always good to see you, brother. I showed Patrick earlier. The week is going good. I can't complain. Client work, regular work, this show. I ain't do no homework today though, dude. No homework today, so I got to get homework in because I got two things due on Wednesday always. So I got to do that. So that's going to be a heavy lift tomorrow, even with client work. So it's going to be interesting over the next couple of days for me. So it's going to be cool. It's going to be real cool. Let's see. Cost of the educational path and devotion needed could be a hindrance to getting more of our folks involved and certified. They also have to be competent rather than just numbers, right? So we're not, so the one thing we're not doing, if you're not competent, we're just not meeting quotas, right? That's not what it is. So I agree with you. It's just not a quota thing, right? People got to be competent, right? And I agree. Cost is a hindrance. Education is a hindrance. I'd agree with that, no question. In 2020, I probably certified more black folks than I ever did in a 2-3 year time frame. Because we just made some things happen. But also in terms of what we made happen, most of those people didn't do much with it. So this is not, trying to say, hey, we need to just free the path for the sake of freeing the path. It is also a statement of people that go on this path. You have things that happen in your life that changes that path to some degree. I was talking to a guy who was on the path to become a CST, and he just had life that just happened, right? Had life that happened, right? It's like going to become a basketball player, and you get off the path at some point, right? A lot of us are older, we can get back on the path. But folks in sports, sometimes they age out. It's just a little bit different. But I agree with you completely that could be an issue. But I think it's an issue for a lot of folks, right? So I would say that when I look at Indian Scrum trainers, there's probably about maybe 5 to 10, maybe even 10 Indian Scrum trainers. And I couldn't say to you that they had a lot of money. I wouldn't say to you that most of them had a lot of money. So do I think it's a money thing? Not necessarily. Do I think one of the problems is that we don't see enough of us there, so we don't believe it's possible? I think that's a bigger part of the issue, right? Is it's kind of like this, Patrick. Why would I go become a certified Scrum trainer if the black certified Scrum trainer I never see? That black certified Scrum trainer is not around, so there's no encouragement of me even going there. Why would I even be interested? So I think we start falling into problems like that is the issue. Which, what can you do about it? I'm looking for my water. I don't see it. So we'll be good to go. So I think it's a litany of problems, Patrick. I can't put my finger on a pulse of it completely, but I can say this. Have we put enough effort to including people so they believe it's a possibility? And I think the answer to that is no. I really think the answer to that one is no. And that part right there is the part that's not is a problem. That's the part that's a problem. And so it would be my job to help resolve that particular problem, if that makes sense, right? Yeah, I'm going to be, Andrew, I will be at Agile 2024. I'm going to stop through. I'll probably be there about the first 2 days. But yeah, I went ahead and reserved for the conference. It's going to be in Dallas. I'm going to be right there. So I'm going to stop through. I'll be there. So just let's connect. Okay. So I'll be there, Agile 2024. Yeah, I'm not speaking at much of anything this year. I will work towards speaking at things next year, not this year. I got too many things on my plate. And then with the family stuff, I just didn't want to make commitments to those kind of things. Yeah. So true talk, we need to start to expose Devon's and company to our folks so that they can see the promise, right? And know it's doable. And that's the key. I really do think that a lot of us just don't think it's doable. And you know how it is, Patrick, when you like get into this world and there's nobody like you. And when it's people like you, a lot of people like you tend to have similar experiences to some degree, and you don't have anybody to have those kind of conversations with, or have those side conversations with. You just don't, right? That's not very encouraging, right? Because it wasn't encouraging for me, right? It just wasn't, right? I'm from the south side of Chicago. There's a certain way that I am. And I'm not saying I don't communicate with other people, but I don't hang out with folks like that, right? I just like to hang out with folks like me, and that's not a bad thing. I like to hang out with folks that's not like me too. But we normally have something similar, right? Yeah, so yeah, we gotta put people in a position where they think it's doable, where more people think it's doable, and the more people that think it's doable, the better an opportunity for us to get more that cross the finish line. Okay, so that's at least what I'm thinking as I move forward and we start doing more of this. So I'm already in conversations, with the president of Scrum Alliance, to start figuring out what we're gonna do. So hopefully we'll have a meeting this month, and start that conversation so we can start moving down the right path. So we're gonna see. We're gonna see. Well, I'm working on it, bro. So I'm gonna be working on it, no question, right? So that being said, any other questions? Any other thoughts? Angela, if you're going to be at Agile 2024, just let me know. Connect with me while I'm there. I'll be around. I'll find some way to get myself involved in something. We'll see. Right? I'll find a way to get involved in something. Just with all seriousness. So we'll see. No joke. All right, so other questions, other thoughts? Okay. It's not too early of a night, so we're kind of good. Yeah, well, we're going to get there, man. I don't have any questions about it. We definitely going to get it, and then we're going to be, like, good to go at that point. So this is a good thing. Hey, no, yeah. Track me down, man. Track me down there, Alex. We'll be good to go. I'll be there. I'll be there. So ain't no question, right? I'll be there. And I always do something where people notice me in some kind of way. Don't ask me why. I just do. So you'll see me around. Trust me on that one. But if you see me, just stop me. Okay? Just stop me. Okay? Other questions, other thoughts? Any other questions from you all? Okay. And we're going to start shutting it down, wrapping it up for the evening. Once again, I think this is good information. Scope is a big thing we always deal with in terms of these efforts, so we want to make sure we do that, deal with scope accordingly. Next week, again, we're going to be talking about scrumming through the triple constraint. The focus is all the way about the triple constraint, right? And how we deal with that triple constraint within Scrum. If you haven't been associated with project management like that, this is a good one to deal with because you're going to deal with this as a Scrum Master or any aspect of the Scrum team. On that note, I'm going to say to you, it's been a pleasure as usual. It's gotten dark outside on me, so I guess it's time to shut it down. All right, I will see you all next week, 8 o'clock. I might be in a different location. We'll see. Other than that, you all have an amazing week. I will see you on the Agile journey. Peace. Have a great one, everybody. Bye-bye.